Hey team, Yasin here, and in this training, we are going to be talking about coaching call number 7, how to do the practice coaching call for that. That is all going to be about conscious eating, step by step, all of the instructions for that. Let's go ahead and dive right in. As always, we are continuing our theme inside of this module of putting your transformation program together. Now, as always, we are going to go ahead and dive into a couple notes before we do that. Of course, we do have the training outline for you as well. Just a couple quick notes on this, right? So first one is I urge you not to skip the intros. I know at this point, you're 7 coaching calls in and you're saying, hey, you know what? I understand the gist of what it is that we're going to be talking about in the beginning of this. For the most part, yes. However, I do want you to remember that we do make subtle changes and mentions around the topic. So even if that means that you are going through these introductions at 1.5 or 2x speed, so be it. But we would highly recommend that you do not skip ahead. It is very important to make sure that you do get those reminders as well. Okay. So unlike some of the other previous coaching calls, we do want to go ahead and put a reminder for the pre-call ritual over here in the beginning of this. I know it's been a couple coaching calls since we spoke about this, and the reason for that being was because of the fact that you were kind of getting the understanding of the structure of all of the coaching calls. But now that you're starting to go ahead and get into the flow of things, I want to go ahead and remind you of the importance of a pre-call ritual, because one of the most disrespectful things that you can do, not only to your practice partner here in RWA and the actual training program, but also to your student as you are going through this process, is by just showing up with your energy all over the place, with your mind in a frantic state of mind. And so you want to make sure that you are actually preparing ahead of time, whether that be you having a practical preparation that takes about 10 or 15 minutes, and then right before the call, making sure that you are making those mindset shifts as well. Okay, so all of that is going to be very important for you to put together. Obviously, we do have inside of the explanation guide specific kind of templates and examples. However, over time, as you start to kind of write out your own pre-call ritual, you're going to start to get a flow of it's kind of like a checklist. And I want to remind you of something very important when it comes to checklists, is that a lot of people think, oh, a checklist is just for me to go ahead and get the habit of it. And then after I get the habit of it, I can forget about the checklist. But the truth is that if you look at airplane pilots and if you look at how many times they have actually flown a plane, every single time they go through their checklist. And the reason for that is because of the fact that they never want to miss a step. And so I know the hardest thing, especially when you are kind of making a checklist and going over and it becomes routine for you, is like, okay, I know what I got to do here. But I would urge you, especially in the beginning, as you are a new RWP, is to go ahead and make that pre-call ritual checklist for yourself, and then make sure that you are actually abiding by it every single time, because that is going to be the preparation that allows you to be able to get into observer mode. So that way you can actually put on your identity and your hat as the remote wellness practitioner, so that way you can be successful with this. Okay. With that being said, that was the pre-call ritual. And then of course we do have the important and the notes around organization equals organization. Make sure that you are keeping your notes organized, whether that be with the template that we provide or otherwise. So that is a very important note for that. And then of course your practice training modules, right? I want you to remember that all of these scripts and all of these resources that we are providing for you inside of this module is for you to be able to get your training wheels, so that way you can go ahead and find your voice. Remember, this is the done for you, do it yourself approach. And then once you actually get your students and everything starts to come together, then you are going to understand that, okay, there's an intake form. I go ahead and customize this based off of what the student tells me. But remember, all of that only happens once you actually find your voice and you have that confidence as well, right? And so that is the purpose of all of the practice here inside of module 5. So that way you can become the best RWP that you can become. From there, we actually go ahead and move on into the coaching call number 7 overview, because coaching call number 7 is going to be where you are going to practice speaking to your practice students about conscious eating and slowing down, right? As you've already learned in a previous training, the importance of how you eat is oftentimes just as important as what you eat. Now, I do want to go ahead and make an important note about this, is that this applies to not only this practice coaching call, but all of the topics as well, is that if you need more details or you want to hear an example of these topics being explained in more detail, then we would urge you to go ahead and refer to the training that you've already gone through and make sure that you reference that. So we went ahead and talked about this in extensive detail in the nutrition how to eat training, right? And so that is the reason why, if you remember earlier on inside of this program, we mentioned that a lot of the previous modules were not meant for you to memorize, but more so for reference purposes. And so you will be revisiting those previous trainings multiple times to refresh yourself on those topics more in depth. Okay, so if you do need more examples, if you go ahead and need more context for all of it, what it is that you are going to be coaching inside of this practice coaching call, make sure that you do go ahead and refer to that. All right. And then the other question that oftentimes will come up here is that, hey, is this going to be the wording and the framing and the scripting that is provided in this practice coaching call? Is this the final way that I'm going to be delivering it? Of course, at this point, you definitely know that no, that is not the case. Do not forget the objective and the purpose for everything here in Module 5. And that is exactly what we are facilitating for you as Remote Wellness Academy, as you being a student inside of this program, as we are facilitating that practice for you, so that way you can expedite and accelerate the process of you finding your voice, and you have all of the tools to be able to do that. Okay, so for now, make sure that you do focus on your practice calls and taking note of what suits you, what doesn't suit you, what you like, what you don't like, so that way over time you can actually continue to get better and better and better. Okay, and so of course along with that comes the understanding that you will be needing to use your coaching skills that you learned throughout Module 4 along this process as well. And then specifically to coaching call number 7, there is going to be student action notes that are specific to this as well. A question that comes up that I do want to go ahead and make sure that we clarify here is that it's important to understand that these notes, these are the action notes for your students. These are notes that are going to be filled out with you, that the student is going to fill out while they are on the coaching call with you. The reason why we are sending them to the student 1 to 2 days before the actual coaching call is so that way the student has time to be able to actually prepare the action notes, right? If they need to print it, if they want to go ahead and do the electronic version, whatever that might be. And the reason we don't send it out like, days and days and days, weeks and weeks and weeks in advance is because we don't want the student to psych themselves out and say, oh, I already know what all of the content is going to be like. And on top of that, remember, they're going to have action steps after every single coaching call. And so you don't want to send them the action notes for next week's coaching call when right now they're focusing on the action steps from the previous coaching call. You don't want to give them that distraction and then all of a sudden they don't give it their best effort on the actual action steps that they're doing, right? And so you're sending them these student action notes so that way they can fill this out with you on the coaching call. And of course, we are going to be walking you through in Module 6 all of the technology on how to be able to do that as well, okay? Coaching call number 7 is also another coaching call where there is going to be a coaching call guide that goes along with it, okay? So you can think of your guide as basically the script with the images instead of the words. As you are going to notice, this is going to be a little bit of a shift compared to other coaching calls, is that we did hear your feedback and then we did hear that, hey, instead of a Google document, it would be helpful to go ahead and put these images into a slides format. And so you're going to see here when we get to the end of this training, we've gone ahead and included a slides version, a Google Slides version of the coaching call guide as well. So that way you have images with slides you can actually pan through as well, okay? Now remember, a lot of these will have RWA logos on them for now, but as long as you have gone ahead and completed the student licensing agreement, we will walk you through on how to be able to make those changes. For right now, they're just for practice purposes, and then you will be able to go ahead and white label them and have your own logo on them once we get into Module 6 as well, okay? With that being said, let's go ahead and hop into the coaching call number 7 explanation. Of course, make sure that you do zoom in and zoom out as you are going through this. Of course, just a reminder, I am not going to be going through word for word through this script. It is ultimately there for you to be able to go through this script and this explanation for you to practice on your own. This explanation training is really here for you to provide you the gist, and that way you can understand, okay, these are all of the frames and the ideas that could be conveyed to the student, and you are going to have to expand and contract according to how the coaching call is going, depending on the student, depending on the partner that you have, XYZ, okay? So with that being said, let's go ahead and hop into the actual explanation of coaching call number 7. Of course, we are starting out with part number 0, which is all about rapport. There is no changes here to the explanation or the script. As always, as we already know, you don't want to skip this, of course, in your practice coaching call, but we know that it is going to change based off of the student and the rapport that you are building with them, okay? From there, we actually go into the first major part of this, which is, of course, continuing continuing our ritual of what is going well. Now, of course, we've gone ahead and included for you a bunch of template questions on here. And of course, you're going to be adding your own as you find out what works for you. If you want to go ahead and add a question to go ahead and check on the positive of what happened in the action steps from the previous coaching call, that's an awesome way to be able to go ahead and start this section as well. And so you want to make sure that you are starting part number 1 with what is going well. And then you want to go ahead and give them that dopamine hit. It's like, hey, awesome. We focus on what it is that is going well rather than putting our attention on what is not going well, right? So that is part number 1. No major changes on that, but of course that is going to be changing as you are going through these coaching calls with your students, okay? Part number 2 from there, again, challenges and obstacles. We're going to go ahead and check in on any difficulties that the student had in the past week from their action steps. And of course, if they did not have any difficulty, we're going to go ahead and ask them how they noticed these action steps were different from what it is that they did in the past, right? And so that way we can go ahead and use this question to make sure that we are cementing and solidifying in the mind of the student about what it is that they are doing this time and how it is so different from what it is that they did in the past, okay? Now, unlike some of the other previous coaching calls where we were dealing with self-sabotage, there is a replacement question sequence in this explanation. So it is a little bit different, okay? So we do have the coaching sequence over here, number 1, right? We are used to already coaching sequence number 2. However, in this specific explanation, we do have a coaching sequence number 3 that is slightly different that you can play around with, and you can even mix and match. And maybe you like this question and you like maybe like this question from this other coaching sequence. You can go ahead and mix and match and find what it is that you like the best. And so there is another new coaching sequence available in here. But remember, at the end of this module, we are going to have a bank of all of this. And of course, you are going to be experimenting and finding what works best for you as well. And remember, I would urge you, if you find something that works really well for you, go ahead and share it with the other RWA family members. Go ahead and reach out to us as coaches and say, hey, I found this. It works really well. I would love to share this with the rest of the community, with the rest of the family. Remember, abundance mindset, reciprocity. The more you give, the more you will receive. And so if you need our help facilitating being able to get this new thing that you found, right, this thing that works really well for you, if you need to facilitate that, getting that to the rest of the family members, go ahead and let us know, and we can go ahead and help make sure that the rest of the students get that announcement, so that way you can go ahead and add and help the rest of the family members as well, okay? But the biggest thing here is we are providing you some different templates on here so that we can choose one of these and practice them inside of the practice coaching call with your partner. And of course, this is going to be highly contextual based off of the difficulties that your actual student has. And then of course, on the left side, we have a couple different notes in terms of approaching with curiosity and helping coach your student to approach their challenges and their obstacles with curiosity as well. Okay, so just keep in mind, we don't want to overwhelm you right now, but you want to go ahead and practice as much as you can. And just to note, when you are actually the student inside of these practice coaching calls, go ahead and be an actual student, right? Don't be a student who every single time says, oh, I didn't have any issues, right? Actually bring up issues and challenges and obstacles so that way your partner can actually get practice helping and coaching you through that as if you are a real life student, okay? And so that is going to help facilitate that, because remember, when you are practicing, you are actually making progress and the mind is not going to know the difference. And so practice helps tremendously. Role play helps tremendously. And so make sure you are being an awesome partner by facilitating that entire process. From there, we actually go ahead and hop into part number 3, which is all about the new information. And so this is going to be where the main topic of coaching call number 7 or practice coaching call number 7 comes in, which is conscious eating. Of course, there is the important note on dialogue there. And then we always do go ahead and get permission from the student so that way we can go ahead and make sure they are on the same page with us. And then we go ahead and start off by giving context to show importance, right? So we go ahead and say, hey, awesome. So today we're going to go ahead and so you can even notice, right? Like as I'm talking to you, and then because I found my voice, because I know how to do this, I have the skill in my repertoire, you can see that even my voice changes, right? As I go into state, as I go into coaching mode, right? You'll see that it goes, okay, today we're going to go ahead and talk about learning how to relax, right? So as you're noticing, my voice changes, my energy changes, right? My facial expressions change, right? I'm smiling, I'm a little bit more expressive, I'm bringing more energy, right? I'm bringing a lot more excitement to the table, right? And so that's something that's a skill that you will learn. And remember, skill equals knowledge times reps, right? You're getting the knowledge and you're putting in the reps with these practice calls, but I'm letting you know right now, even at the end of all of these practice calls, right? Skill equals knowledge times reps. Even though you are going to be doing these practice calls, just doing them one time with your partner, it's not going to suit the bill, right? For some students, it's going to take having to deliver the same coaching call 5, 6, 7, 8 times, right, in a real life setting in order to actually be able to develop the skill of finding your voice. But I promise you, when you develop that skill of finding your voice, it is going to become so invaluable for you because you can literally transform people's lives using your voice and using your mind and being able to do that around the entire world wherever you are, okay? And so it's an extremely invaluable skill, so I'm telling you it's going to be absolutely worth it, okay? So that's just a quick side note that I wanted to go ahead and make, and let's go ahead and jump into the actual script again, right? So we say, cool, hey Tina, awesome. So today we're gonna learn how to relax. Now, why is this important? Because when you are relaxed, everything in life, especially all 4 areas of life, just gets better. Specifically, when it comes to health and excess fat though, when you are relaxed, you burn more fat versus when you're stressed, you actually accumulate more fat. And unfortunately, Tina, it's very, very sad that unfortunately eating under stress is not only common in our society today, it's actually socially acceptable for us to be stressed, and we just understand like, oh, I just eat at my computer, and it's like socially understandable, right? And then you're gonna go ahead I'm breaking frame here to go ahead and talk to you guys as RWA students, is that you're gonna go ahead and show this image while you're talking. You're gonna notice that especially in the one-on-one format, you did notice that we do this in the hybrid format as you were going through the RWA program, but we are including kind of visual representations of the ideas as we are speaking of them, right? Especially in the one-on-one format, if they're just looking at you as a talking head, it's very easy for the student to lose the train of thought, to forget where they're at. And so you want to provide them that visual reference so that way they can actually see, okay, hey, this is a visual of the topic that we are talking about, right? So even though you are not showing them your script, even though you're not walking them through exactly what it is that you're saying, right? I know in the hybrid version, we do provide kind of that script. So when you're going through and listening to me, a lot of times, 80, 90%, it's kind of like, okay, you get the visual, you get the auditory, you go ahead and hear my voice, and then you can also see kind of the script that I'm reading off of. And that is a process that we have perfected after over a decade of education, developing education material. We found that, hey, the visual with the script and the auditory is one of the best ways for the student to learn. However, in the one-on-one format, it'll just be really weird if you just shared your screen and then had your script and read off of it, right? And so you're going to be showing this image while you are talking, and then you're going to go ahead and continue with the explanation on there, okay? So from there, you go ahead and show the image and say, hey, cool, so here's the truth. In today's world, eating is something that we do on autopilot, right? Something that we can do blindfolded without thinking automatically. It's almost like if we're managing a job, having a family, having a life, it's like we need to eat on autopilot while we are stressed just in order to get it out of the way. And so you're going to notice here, I'm going to break frame again just to be able to explain to you guys as RWA students, is that you'll notice that the articulation of the words, right? Because I found my voice, because I have that skill in my toolbox, in my tool belt, you'll notice that even though these are the words, why is it that when I read the words, it comes off and sounds a certain way, but then when a beginner RWP reads those words, it comes off on a different way? It's because of the articulation, right? If you look at the way that we're reading this, right, it's like, okay, we need to eat on autopilot, right? It's as if we need to eat on autopilot while we are stressed out just to be able to get it out of the way, right? And so you can tell the tonality, right? But this is all a skill. This is all something that you learn through repetition, and you get better and better and better at it. And so over time, it becomes something that is very easy for you to be able to do, okay? So I just wanted to go ahead and mention that very quickly as we're going through here, is that you'll notice the tonality changes, and that's only because of the fact that that's something that happens once you found your voice and you actually have this skill in your tool belt, okay? And so we're gonna go ahead and continue here. It's like, okay, stress is the opposite of relaxation, right? When do we feel stress? It's when we're moving fast. And so when we're moving fast through life, it's like we almost have to eat fast in order to be able to keep up. Does that make sense? Yes. And then from there, I'm breaking frame here again. You can see I switch back and forth very quickly, is because I'm going from coaching mode to going ahead and talking to RWA students, right? So from there, we're going to go ahead and introduce the limbic and conscious, and that's what we're going to go ahead and talk about here. And so from there, we go ahead and transition, right? So it's like, okay, cool. So this fast moving, stressed out autopilot mode is what we call here at NutriFit Wellness Academy, insert remote wellness practice name over here. This is what we call the limbic mode, okay? And so visually, this is what it looks like, Tina. And then you go ahead and again, show this image, because this image is going to give them that visual representation of this abstract concept. So that way they can actually tie it to something, and that way it actually helps them learn better, right? So while showing the image, we go ahead and say, okay, cool. Well, you don't need to know the details of this really, Tina, but what you have to know is that the limbic system is a part of our brain that is responsible for our emotions. And so there are two modes that someone can be in. The first mode is that if they are conscious, they're deliberate, they're in the present moment, they're actually realizing realizing what it is that they're doing, that's what we call being in conscious mode, right? What mode is that, Tina? Tina says conscious mode. Awesome, right? The second mode, and the reason why this is kind of like an advanced tactic that we sometimes use in teaching or coaching, is that when you have them repeat it, even though you just said it, it's like, hey, what mode is that? Conscious mode. And so that way there's that engagement that's going on as you're going through the new information, right? And then the second mode is that if you're on autopilot, see the second mode, you see that tonality, kind of how it changes. Again, that's a skill of finding your own voice. So the second mode is that if you're on autopilot mode, getting lost in thoughts and emotions and living in the past or the future, then that's what we call being in limbic mode. And so you see, even the pause in between this is like, that's what we call being in limbic mode, right? So you see the tonality, the inflections going up and down, all of that is a part of finding your own voice as well. Now, I know I'm really hammering this point inside of this coaching call explanation, but I did want to go ahead and really clarify this, because sometimes a lot of students have a question of like, hey, what does it mean to find my voice? And so that's why I wanted to go ahead and give a bunch of examples of that, right? So we call this being in limbic mode. What mode is that, Tina? Tina says limbic mode. Exactly, right? And so being in limbic mode is the opposite of being in conscious mode. Does that make sense? Yes. Awesome. So between the two, Tina, right, and you're showing this image on here. So between the two, the left and the right, the left person is in stressed limbic mode and the right person is in relaxed conscious mode. Between the two, who do you think is going to make better choices? The limbic person or the conscious person? Right? The better choice is conscious person. Okay, cool. Who do you think is going to have a better physical and mental health? Right? Who do you think is going to be more successful in wellness and in life in general? And so, Tina, the bottom line is that you can eat the best, healthiest meal on the planet, but if you eat in a stressed out, anxious, limbic state, your digestion and overall health is dramatically going to be diminished. Is that making sense, Tina? Do you see how powerful this actually is? Right? So you're kind of adding all of that and ad-libbing as you kind of go along here. And then from there, we go ahead and kind of add a little bit of proof to what it is that we said, because how the human mind works, even though we often make decisions based off of emotions, we kind of need a little bit of science, a little bit of logic in order to justify that. And so that's what we go ahead and explain right here in the next part, right? So how does this actually work, Tina, from a scientific perspective, right? You might be wondering. Well, let's go ahead and talk about that right now. But before I do that, I just want to go ahead and let you know is that you don't need to know any of the science pieces of this. And so if everything or anything that I say goes completely over your head, I just want you to completely disregard it, okay? I just want to go ahead and explain it to you so that way you understand that everything we're talking about is based in science, but you don't need to know the science. Does that make sense, Tina? Yes, that makes sense. Now, you see here, I definitely went ahead and ad-lib this. I did not go off of the script. But once you understand kind of the principle behind it, you can start to kind of ad-lib according to how things are going, right? So you can go ahead and read the script on there. You can go ahead and ad-lib on there. But the point is that you want to pre-frame before you actually go into the science of things. It's very common for students to kind of get overwhelmed and think that they have to memorize all of that. And so you're kind of pre-framing that and kind of giving them that reassurance that they don't necessarily have to keep up and remember all of the science stuff as well. Okay, so from there you go ahead and jump into, so let's go ahead and talk about how this actually works. And then you're going to go ahead and show this table. This is the visual for this section that we're going to go ahead and talk about next, right? So a part of our nervous system is called the autonomic nervous system, okay? That is the part of our nervous system that's responsible for digestion. Again, don't worry, you don't got to remember the name of it. So again, you'll see, I'm just going ahead and giving that reassurance to the student because now you're using technical terms, and especially for students, using that technical language can sometimes overwhelm them, and so you want to kind of just give them that ability to let go of having to remember that, right? And so there are two parts of the autonomic nervous system. There's the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. So the sympathetic part of the nervous system is responsible for when we are stressed out, okay? That's the part of our nervous system that gets activated when we're in like something called fight or flight mode. Maybe you've heard about this, right? When all of a sudden we get stressed out, sympathetic nervous system is what gets activated. The second part is what's called the parasympathetic nervous system, which is what allows us to be able to relax, right? I sometimes think about this is that when somebody is stressed out, right? You got to have sympathy for them. That's the sympathetic nervous system. But again, don't worry. If this goes over your head, you don't have to remember it, okay? But the big thing that you do want to know is that when you are in those two different states, there are two different things that are happening to you, okay? Because if your stress response is on, then your relaxed response is off, okay? So if you are limbic stressed, these are all of the things that are happening to you, right? Your sympathetic nervous system is on, you're stressed, you're eating to survive, your cognitive function decreases, digestion decreases, calorie burning capacity decreases, and then, I'm breaking frame here to talk to you guys as RWA students, is that you go ahead and read through this table, right? And then compare that to when you are actually relaxed. When you are relaxed, your parasympathetic nervous system is on, okay? And then all of this is happening, and then you go ahead and read through that as well. I'm not reading reading through it for the sake of the script, but you can definitely go ahead and read it if it's suitable when you are doing your practice coaching call. And then from there, we're going to go ahead and hop into going ahead and asking a little bit of dialogue. Is this making sense so far? The student responds. And then we go ahead and talk about taking this a layer deeper, right? So we go ahead and explain how the brain interprets stress, right? So we go ahead and say, hey, now we're going to go ahead and take this a level deeper in our understanding of this. And so I want to go ahead and talk to you about why this happens, right? Why does our body actually get stress? Now, I want you to pay attention with me on this, Tina, because a lot of people really don't understand this the way that we're about to go ahead and do this. And some people I kind of understand why we get stressed, but they've never actually been able to put a label to this. Okay, so this is going to be very, very awesome for you to understand. Are you ready, Tina? Yes, awesome. So let me go ahead and ask you a question, Tina. Have you ever had the experience of eating a full meal, like a complete full-on meal, right? And then you end up still being hungry after that, right? Like it's as if no matter what you do, you can't get satisfied no matter how much you eat. Does that make sense? Yes? Okay, cool. Student responds. They said, yes, I've had that experience before. Well, that's a typical good sign that you were eating from a stress response and your body actually wasn't prepared to actually digest the food in order to get the nutrients that it needed. Now, I'm going to break frame here to go ahead and talk to you about this. You'll see a lot of ad-libbing here as we're kind of going along here. This is what I'm talking about when we go ahead and kind of ditch the script. We kind of go a little bit off of script here, but you're not doing it so much so that like you took this small section here and you made it like a 15-minute section, right? You don't want to go off of script where it becomes completely like out there, but at the same time, like reading word for word off of the script. Hey, even though like this is the script that we literally wrote, you'll see that we literally ad-lib it as we're going along here as well. Okay, so this is a good sign. Then we go ahead and so we go, cool. So when you're stressed, what do you think, Tina, when you're stressed, what do you think happens to digestion? You go ahead and let the student guess. Exactly, right? It shuts down. Digestion shuts down. And so because you have to remember that our bodies and our brains were not designed for the time that we live in right now. I'm about to show you something really cool, okay, Tina? Hang in there. This is going to be really awesome, right? Here's what you got to know is that our brain and our body is over 200,000 years old, okay? And then you can go ahead and show the image while we are talking here, right? And so cool. And so how much, Tina, do you think that times have changed in the last 200,000 years? Think about it. Right now we're in the year 2022, 2023, 2024, whatever it is, right? That's only 2,000 years, right? Imagine 200,000 years. How much do you think times have actually changed since then, right? Probably a lot, right? And so back to the digestion, we said that when you are in a stressed state, what happens to digestion? Digestion shuts down. Exactly. And so the classical example of this is that what if you were being chased by a lion after lunch? Okay. Now, I know this sounds like a crazy example, but if you think about it, from the time that our brain and body was designed to over 200,000 years ago, this is a very, very classical example, an actual example of the time that our body and our brain was designed for, right? The body and brain that we have now was designed to be able to survive when a lion is chasing us after lunch, right? And you can go ahead and show the image. Is that so what do you think the body would do with that sandwich that you ate after lunch when you're actually being chased by a lion? And then you can go ahead and pause here if you want. Don't pause here. It's up to you. It's up to you because sometimes if you're actually having a lot of pauses, it kind of gets annoying as well, right? And so sometimes you can actually just ask a question and kind of make that a rhetorical question. And then based off of your tonality, the student will know that it's a rhetorical question and just kind of nod their head, right? So it's like, okay, what do you think would happen, right? If you're being chased by a lion thousands of years ago, our body wouldn't be worried about digesting the sandwich that we had for lunch, right? The sympathetic nervous system would act effectively to basically shut down digestion, and it's going to direct the blood flow from our stomach and actually put it towards our arms and our legs and our brain so that way we can actually think very quickly to escape from the lion, right? And so this is a genius, really intelligent mechanism that is in place inside of our bodies automatically for our survival, right? However, the problem with this and the problem with this mechanism, right, that's inside of our body is that we probably don't encounter lions anymore around lunch hours, do we, Tina? I mean, at least I don't, right? I don't know how it is for, other people. Do you run away from lions at lunchtime daily, Tina? Probably not, right? And then you guys kind of have a laugh about that, right? So you can see here there's some fun that kind of you can put into this as well, right? And then you kind of make it your own joke if you'd like. However, Tina, have you ever been maybe late for a meeting? You got stuck in a traffic jam, you had an argument with a loved one, right? Because our brain and body was designed for a time 200,000 years ago, our brain and our body actually does not know the difference between all of those things or a lion that is trying to kill us in the wild. And then you can go ahead and show all of these different images inside of your slides, right? So you're saying, hey, if you're late for work, if you're having an argument with a spouse, if you're really stressed out at work, right? On a physiological level, like where physiological means like on our body level, right? Our body does not know the difference between a lion chasing us or our boss yelling at us or us getting tense inside of a traffic jam or us having a fight with our spouse. For a physiological level, even though some of those things are life-threatening and others are not, but guess what? On a body level, on a physiological level, even though psychologically we know the difference, we know that, hey, me being stressed out at work is not the same as me being chased by a lion, right? But our body and our nervous system cannot tell the difference. It's the same chemicals that are released, and then all of a sudden our body thinks that it is actually going through a life-threatening event, right? And so what that happens is that even though we are going through all of these things that are in our modern day society, being stressed out at work, being in an argument with our loved one, the same stress response gets turned on inside of our body. And so then what happens is our digestion shuts off and our metabolism slows down, all because we are stressed. And guess what? When the stress response is on, guess what is off? Exactly. The relaxation response is off, right? And let me go ahead and remind you, let me go ahead and pull up that table again, and then you can go ahead and share the table over here. What happens when we are having the stress response on and the relaxation response off? All of these things, right? And so this is why so many people have issues, especially with fat around the belly, because of a hormone called cortisol, which is actually the stress hormone, which is released when we are stressed out. And so studies have shown that increased cortisol levels in the system actually leads to fat accumulation, right? And so people who tend to gain weight, primarily around the belly in particular, they likely experience a lot of constant low-level stress, which creates extra cortisol in the body, which has this effect of increasing fat around the belly, okay? And so if the body is in this constant low-level stress state most of the time, then they might lose a couple pounds here and there, right? But their body really thinks that, hey, we are constantly being on the threat. Our life is constantly being threatened and we're being constantly chased by this lion. And so even though they might go ahead and diet, they might have calorie cutting, they might do treadmilling, they might do all of that. If they're in a constantly stressed state, their body is going to have a tough time actually relaxing, actually reducing the inflammation, actually reducing the cortisol levels, and being able to release fat and all of those kinds of things as well, okay? And so the thing that we need to learn from this is that unfortunately most people don't understand that there is a skill of how to relax. It's actually a skill to learn how to be able to regulate your stress levels. And this is the thing, is that we didn't have to learn this for a long time, is because us being stressed out all the time, guess what? Our body actually enjoys it. Our body actually likes when we're anxious and being stressed out all the time. Why? Because when we are stressed out all the time, if we were living 200,000 years ago, if we were living 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 years ago, guess what? Us being stressed out and being anxious would actually keep us alive. And so because our body prioritizes keeping ourselves alive, our body actually likes to be stressed out. How crazy is that, right? Our body isn't optimizing for thriving, for fulfillment, for happiness, right? Our body doesn't care about any of that. Our body cares about survival, okay? And so as a result, in the modern world, learning how to relax is actually a skill that is actually unnatural. It's something that we actually need to learn, right? And so learning to relax is a skill that unfortunately so many of us have never actually learned, right? How many times have you ever taken a class on how to relax or stress management, right? This is something that unfortunately you can add to the list of life critical skills that school never taught us, right? How crazy is this? Is this turning on some light bulbs for you, Tina? Are you starting to have some ahas from this, Tina? And then all of a sudden Tina's like, yes, this is so deep. This is amazing. This is really, really awesome. This is an amazing transformation program. I'm so happy I'm inside of this program. I'm not going to only be able to help myself. I'm going to be able to help my kids. I'm going to be able to help my family. I'm going to be able to help my spouse. All of these people are going to benefit because I am learning these skills that are going to allow me to be able to live a better life for the long term, even after I've gone through this transformation program, right? And so as you can see here, I went ahead, I know I went super off in terms of the script here, but there's a lot of ad-libbing that you can do. Once you're finding your voice, you're finding your passion, you're really starting to get a hang of this, you can really start to be able to ad-lib a lot of this. And it's just pieces, right? As you practice, don't get stressed out. You're like, oh no, there's no way that I can do whatever Coach Yasin just did right now. Don't worry. Hey, I've had hundreds and thousands of reps over and over and over and over again. And I'm not special. This includes every single one of the RWA coaches as well. It's just repetition. It's just repetition. It's just repetition. And so don't go out there and poo-poo on yourself. Don't go out there and judge yourself. Don't go out there and abuse yourself. just remember, hey, it's just repetition. And as long as you stick with it, as long as you have the grit to be able to stick with it and put in that repetition over and over and over again, as long as you do that, you will ultimately be able to be successful with this. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and move on here with the script. That is the gist of what it is that we are talking about here in the new information section. And then from there, in order to facilitate that additional student dialogue, so that way it doesn't feel like you just kind of yelled or lectured or vomited on the student, you go ahead and have a little bit of a dialogue here where you go ahead and ask the student what their stressors are, right? Now that we understand a better understanding of, stress and how it impacts the health, I'm curious, Tina, what are your 3 common stressors that you experience, and how does your body respond to those, right? And this is something that they can go ahead and actually fill out inside of their student action notes, and that way you can go ahead and take note of that as well. Now, this is going to be a section where you can expand or contract according to the time that you have, right? Because at the same time, there is a well-balanced kind of machine here, whereas that you don't want to have the coaching call be so short where the student doesn't feel like they got value out of the time that they had with you. Now, remember, we've talked about this before though, is that your entire transformation product is not only the coaching calls, right? This is where a lot of people get stuck and they're like, oh, I'm charging per hour, I'm charging per session, all of that kind of hullabaloo, hocus pocus stuff. No, we're not doing any of that stuff, okay? We're not charging per hour, not charging per session. We have a transformation that we are selling, right? But at the same time, even though we're not being billed by hour, even though we're billed by transformation, we also don't want to make our coaching calls like 15 or 20 minutes long, right? And so as you are developing your voice, as you're getting more practice with this, you're kind of getting an idea and the sense of the hour that you have with that student. And that way you can kind of collapse, expand, and contract things accordingly. So that way you can make sure that you are hitting that kind of magical, maybe 45 minutes, 60 minutes time frame. So that way you do also have enough time to prepare for the next student if you do have a student coming up next with their coaching call, right? So this is going to be another one of those sections that if you wanted to expand or contract, you could based off of asking more questions. And then after you've gone ahead and had that dialogue regarding stressors, you can have that same dialogue regarding relaxers, right? And this is going to be another place that they can go ahead and fill in inside of their student action notes. And you are also going to go ahead and take note of this as well. Okay. So, and then again, you can go ahead and expand or collapse this accordingly. Okay. Now, after that, right, typically at the end of the new information section, you do typically want to go ahead and bring the student's attention back to the bigger picture. Now, I know I did this earlier, a little bit earlier when we talked about the skills and school and the mission and all that kind of stuff. But if you didn't want to do it there, you could always do it at the end here as well. Now, there are an unlimited ways that you could actually do this. I'm going to walk you through just 2 ways of this, right? However, the principle behind this is what it is that you need to understand is that at the end of the new information and typically throughout your entire training modules, you always want to bring the student's attention back to the bigger picture. Why? Because it's very easy to get lost in tactics and to-dos and action items and that kind of stuff. But when you actually walk the student and bring their attention back to the bigger picture, they're understanding, oh, this is the reason why all of this is happening, right? And there are 2 typical ways that you can do this. Again, like I said, there's a billion other ways that you can come up with doing this, but 2 that we would recommend definitely sprinkling in is number 1 is the mission and why this is different, right? Throwing rocks at like, hey, there's all those workout programs and meal plans that are out there. They don't actually help their customers, clients, or students, because at the end of the day, if somebody doesn't actually change their identity, somebody doesn't learn the skills, somebody doesn't learn the education, then they're not going to be able to do it by themselves for the rest of their life, right? So that's kind of the mission. Hey, this is why what we're doing here, insert the remote wellness practices name. This is why what we're doing here is different. This is why, you're a part of this in terms of breaking the generational ignorance. All of those are very powerful things that you can do, okay? The second thing that you can sprinkle in order to pull the attention of the student back to the bigger picture is if they are in this coaching call past the becoming process coaching calls, right? They understand what the becoming process is. They understand the importance of the becoming process and why becoming their version 2.0 identity is the big thing that they need to do in order to have lasting, lifelong transformation. If they understand all of that, what you can do is you can bring their attention back to the becoming process, right? And you can tell them, hey, are you starting to see how all of this relates to the who that you are becoming? Are you seeing how all of this relates to your version 2.0 identity? And then from there, you can go ahead and have a little bit of a mini conversation if you had the time in the coaching call to say, okay, how do you see this topic really going ahead and influencing your becoming journal? And how do you see this tying into the version 2.0 identity that you have, right? And so remember, at the end of the day, the reason why we have this other bigger picture here that we're relating it back to is because ultimately, remember, unless you're able to help your student have that change at the identity and the being level, it's going to be difficult for that to be able to actually stick. Remember, this is the big quote that we went ahead and put together for you guys, is that your external reality is just a reflection of your internal identity with a delay, right? We've talked about this many times before, but there's a number of prompts that you can go ahead and use here. Again, remember, you can just pick some of these and kind of test them out, practice with them, figure out what it is that you like. If you wanted to go ahead and prepare some of the images as well that you wanted to share with the student, so be it. You can go ahead and do that as well. But this is the second way that you can sprinkle throughout the entire transformation modules, right? I'm not going to say this every single time, but really at the end of the day, like even in between, like you saw, I used the mission earlier. Later on inside of the experience exercise, you can go ahead and sprinkle in a little bit of becoming process. Like this really is something that is a theme that you are remembering in the back of your head as any opportunity where you can go ahead and connect what it is that you are talking to the student about, and you connect that to the bigger picture, whether that be about the mission, why this transformation program is different, throwing rocks at other methods that don't work so that way the student is more bought in and sold into this transformation process, whether that be the relating it to the becoming process, whatever it is. You can always go ahead and sprinkle this in throughout the entire training modules, and it's going to be extremely, extremely impactful. So that way it's not just tactics and to-dos and that kind of stuff. The student is able to get their head above the water and see how all of this connects. And that really goes ahead and gets the student more emotionally and really psychologically invested in the entire process, okay? And so that is the note that I wanted to go ahead and make here at the end of this part when we talk about the new information. From there, we go ahead and then talk about part number 4. And part number 4 is the experience exercise that you are going to be walking the student through. Of course, there is an important note on dialogue there as well. And so then what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go ahead and start this experience exercise by introducing the importance of this specific breathing pattern. So inside of this coaching call number 7, one of the experience exercises that we're going to go ahead and walk you through as an RWA student to be able to deliver is what we call the 2-minute breathing pattern, okay? Now, this is something that is going to be new for you to learn as well. So this is the cool thing. I've said this many times in the past. This is the cool thing about being a remote wellness practitioner, about being an RWP, is that not only are you learning, but you are also teaching and helping others. So it's really a win-win situation there. So what we're going to be doing here is we're going to go ahead and introduce and get buy-in. This is sometimes what we call a temp check. Okay, what is a temp check? A temp check, typically in sales or sometimes in teaching and coaching, is when we're getting a temperature check on where the mindset of the student is, so that way they are able to go ahead and continue having the conversation with us or are ready for the topic that we're going to introduce. Okay, so it's kind of like, okay, so now that we understand the importance of relaxation on health, let's go ahead and make this actionable, right? Because the question is, how? How am I actually going to shift my mental state from that stressed limbic response to my relaxed conscious response, right, Tina? Like how? We've talked about this. It's all theoretical. We've talked about how our brain is over 200,000 years old, and we've talked about all this stuff, but how in the world, Coach Yasin, how in the world, Coach, fill in the blank, how in the world am I actually going to do this? Well, don't worry, Tina. That's why we got your back, right? The good news is that it takes less than 2 minutes to go from a distressed, right, in a stressed state of mind and move into a conscious, relaxed state of mind. And the cool thing about this is that this is completely allows you to become stress-free anywhere, anytime, and that way you can tap into your conscious eating state and get all of those benefits that we talked about, right? Would you like to know how we do this, Tina? I know you would, right? I know. And then we take it from there. Again, you see, I'm just ad-libbing here, right? It's just me. I'm just kind of coaching myself at this point, or coaching hypothetical Tina. But even then, even though when I'm doing this, right, if Tina was really in front of me, I would be able to feed off of her energy based off of her nonverbal communication, based off of her facial reactions, based off of how she's responding to what it is that I'm saying, based off of what it is that I'm seeing. I can go ahead and have that engagement, so that way she's really having an experience as she's going through this entire process, right? And then from there, we go ahead and move into the next part, is that, okay, what we're going to go ahead and do is I'm going to walk you through how to be able to hack the central nervous system, right? The nervous system that you have. We're going to talk about how to be able to hack that to be able to actually turn off the stress response and turn on the relaxed conscious response. How? Via something called a conscious breathing pattern, okay? We're going to do an exercise together that's going to teach you how to control your stress levels all by just changing your breath. How cool is that, right? Now you might be thinking, or some students might be thinking, yeah, I already know how to breathe. I've been breathing for a very long time. But stick with me here. I promise you've never heard of what it is that we're about to talk about before. So again, I'm going to break frame here. This is an important kind of thing that we often do, is that when you're talking about a topic that sometimes, the student feels like they might know, they can sometimes mentally check out. But then when you actually put this like one sentence ear, it's like, okay, wait a second. They addressed my concern. They said, oh, it's not normal breathing. It's something specific, right? And so that way they get bought in mentally again, right? So a lot of people don't know is that we can actually change the state of our mind by using specific patterns of breathing. We can actually trick our nervous system, right? If you ever look at someone who's stressed, right, their breathing changes, it becomes faster, versus someone who's relaxed or is about to fall asleep, their breathing slows down. And so the mind impacts the breathing. But here's the cool thing. It also works in the opposite way, right? So we can use our breathing to control the mind. How cool is that, right? In fact, the reason why this is so powerful is because I don't know if you know this, but humans are one of the only living creatures on the planet that can actually control their breathing consciously, right? We can actually control how we breathe, right? We can literally change our brain chemicals and our state of mind by changing our breathing. Now, I do want to go ahead and pause here and kind of give you a little bit of a note in terms of voice tonality and being able to speak and really being able to have that coaching frame and finding your voice, is that a lot of times when we're kind of reviewing students' coaching calls, you'll notice that as I'm changing the tonality and bringing energy to this, I'm also putting pauses in this, right? It's like we can literally change our brain chemicals and our state of mind by changing our breathing, right? Now, so you see, that was a little bit of an extreme example. That would be a little bit awkward if I did that in practice, but you'll see here that don't be afraid to kind of mess around with your speaking and your energy levels, especially in these practice environments. Really be able to start practicing bringing that energy, right? Really being able to be that engaging character that the student is almost like they're captivated by your speaking, by how you're presenting yourself, by the energy that you're bringing. It's really captivating. So do not be afraid to bring that energy, smile a little bit. Don't be just like reading, okay, we can literally change our brain chemicals and our state of mind just by changing our breathing. So, since we're in a stressful state, if we consciously adopt a specific deep breathing pattern that is similar to a relaxed state, the brain thinks, oh man, I was a nervous wreck, but now all of a sudden I'm breathing like a relaxed person, so I must be relaxed. You see how the tonality makes a massive difference, right? So if I go ahead and read this, same words, right? But in different tonality, different energy, it's going to have a completely different experience for the person that I'm actually coaching, right? So here's the thing, Tina, when we're in a stressful state, right? You can even see when I said stressful state, right? I took on, like, even if you look at my nonverbal cues here, if you can't see my hands right now, but it's the same thing as like, hey, I'm putting myself as if my tonality, my voice is in a stressful state, right? So when we're in a stressful state, if we consciously adopt a specific deep breathing pattern that is similar to a relaxed state, the brain thinks, oh man, I was a nervous wreck, but now all of a sudden I'm breathing like a relaxed person, so I must be relaxed. Well, guess what? It's time to change things around. And so you'll see even my voice changed. That was kind of, mimicking how the brain would think. The voice changed there, right? Now, again, I know this sounds a little bit more advanced. You're like, what in the world, Coach Yassine? What are you talking about? This is insane. I don't know what you're talking about here. Stick with me here, okay? Because this really is a skill. Now, can you be an awesome RWP? Can you be an awesome coach without doing this? Yes. But I'm trying to teach you guys the advanced level of coaching so that way you can be captivating when you're actually speaking as well. It can be an experience for the person that is listening for you. And these are some of the pro tips that I want to go ahead and at least highlight and deliver. You might not be able to emphasize this. You might not be able to practice this immediately, but I promise you, as you get better day by day by day, as you put in more and more reps, it's going to become easier and easier and easier for you. Okay, so let's go ahead and get back into the script here. So it's like, okay, studies have shown by learning. I'm going to go a little bit faster here just so that way you guys get the point here. Just make sure that you do go through the explanation and do read all of this out loud before you actually do your practice call. Okay, do not be one of those failure students who says, cool, I'm just going to read this script for the first time in front of my practice student. Make sure that you are actually practicing this over and over and over again the proper way, okay? So studies have shown by learning how to control our stress levels, by using stress levels, you see how the difference there? By using conscious breathing, people have actually been able to cure things like heartburn, IBS, constipation, and even long-term has helped people with heart disease, heart attack, high blood pressure, and so many other health-related issues, all because of learning how to manage their stress. And guess what? That's only with health. Imagine how much of the other areas of life, right? We talked about health, wealth, relationships, and a connection to something greater. Imagine how much of the other areas of life also benefit when we actually learn how to be able to lower our stress levels consciously. Pretty cool, right, Tina? Yes, that's really cool. Awesome. So this specific breathing pattern that I'm about to go ahead and walk you through right now, there are 3 steps to this. And don't worry, I'm going to walk you through it step by step by step. It's going to seem like it's long, but I promise you, once you understand the gist of it, it takes less than 2 minutes to do. But the 3 steps that I'm going to walk you through are step number 1, the physiological sigh. Step number 2 is something that we call 5-5-7 breathing. And then step number 3 is engaging the senses. Okay, so don't worry about that. We're going to go ahead and talk about that in detail right now. Are you ready to go ahead and give this a shot? Yes, I'm ready to go ahead and give this a shot. Awesome. Let's go ahead and talk about that right now. So step number 1 is what's called the physiological sigh. Now, this is also going to be new for you guys as RWA students, right? So make sure that you are paying attention to this. And if you do have questions about this, if you need a practical example of this, make sure you do let us know on the coaching calls and we can walk you through that as well. Okay, so you would go ahead and talk to your student. So the first step of this breathing pattern is to do something called a physiological sigh. Now, what is the physiological sigh? So researchers have actually found a reflex that every human has that's called a physiological sigh. And now you might know a sigh. A sigh is like, when you take a long exhale, like, right? That's a sigh. But a physiological sigh is a little bit different because it actually has 2 inhales, and it actually has been proven to reduce stress levels almost immediately. And the crazy thing about this is that scientists figured this out and found this out by actually discovering and seeing what people do naturally when they're falling asleep, what the body automatically does throughout the day when it's trying to relax. And then you can also see this, that when people are crying, the body knows how to do this even without them consciously knowing it. And so the cool thing is that we can actually hijack this. We can actually do this consciously to reduce our stress levels immediately. And so let me go ahead and walk you through how this works. Now, I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate this for you guys as RWA students as well, and then go ahead and make sure you let us know if you do need help on this on a coaching call as well. So it really is quite simple. All you're doing is you're inhaling long through your nose until your lungs are almost full. And then without exhaling, you go ahead and do a quick inhale one more time, right? So that's the second inhale. So there's 2 inhales and then there's a long exhale through the mouth. Okay, now I want to go ahead and emphasize this really quickly. I'm not going to read this through the script, but I want to emphasize this for yourself, is that the exhale is really the key here. Okay, so you want to have a long exhale because when you have a long exhale, that's how you reduce your heart rate. Okay, so how it looks is like, so it's 2 inhales, okay? So it's 1 long inhale through the nose and then another inhale very quickly through the nose. So it's 2 inhales and then 1 long exhale through the mouth. And you repeat that 3 times. Now, a quick note is that we do not replace our standard breathing. This is something that we only do 3 times in order to get the relaxation response started, right? What it does is it actually triggers the calming reflex in our body and our organs. And then about 40 to 60 seconds after doing this 3 times, our heart rate will actually slow down as well, okay? So just 3 of these physiological size has been proven to reduce our stress levels extremely fast, and all of our neurochemistry and the physiology changes accordingly as well. Okay, so then you can go ahead and walk your student through doing this together and do 3 physiological sighs in order to get the process started. And then after you've gone ahead and done that 3 times, you go ahead and say, cool. Well, step number 2 is what we call 5-5-7 breathing. Okay, so this is basically after taking 3 sighs, 3 physiological sighs, we take 10 breaths by focusing on making our exhales longer than our inhales. This is what we call the 5-5-7 breathing, right? So we inhale through our nose if possible. If you got to do it through your mouth, so be it. But through the nose is the best if you don't have any nose issues or anything like that, right? So you inhale for 5. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? You hold for 5. So it's hold for 5, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, right? And then you exhale for 7. Now, the key here is that you want to exhale longer than you inhale. This is very important, is because when you emphasize the exhales, which are longer than your inhales, what happens is that your body actually slows down your heart rate. You're actually calming down the nervous system. Versus if you're trying to energize yourself, then what you do is you go ahead and make your inhales longer than your exhales, right? And so the importance here is a 5-5-7 breathing. You're inhaling for 5, you're holding for 5, and then you're exhaling for 7, 8, 9, probably around 7, right? And so then you can go ahead and explain this and do this with your student as well. But one thing I want to go ahead and mention here is that obviously, because I'm explaining this to you, not only to you as RWA students, but also to Tina, is that obviously because I'm explaining this to you, Tina, it is taking a little bit longer, but I promise you, once you get the gist of these 3 steps, it happens very instantaneously. Boom, 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 boom. You do your 3 physiological sighs, and then you do your 10 5-5-7 breathing. And then from there, Tina, what we do is we go ahead and do step number 3, which is engaging the senses. So the last step after we do our 3 physiological sighs and our 10 deep breaths is that we return to our normal breathing, which will be a lot slower and calmer at this point, right? But now what we do is we engage our senses, right? What we do is we engage all of our senses to bring ourselves to the present moment. So right now, as you're sitting on your chair, Tina, I want you to do this, okay? I want you to go ahead and feel the weight of your body in the chair, okay? I want you to feel your feet on the floor, right? Actually get in tune with your senses. I want you to notice with your eyes the things that you're looking at, notice the things around you, right? I want you to notice any sounds around you. I want you to be able to feel the tips of your fingers if you want to rub them together, right? What you're doing is you're engaging your senses because that's what it means to be able to come back to the present moment, right? We're not getting lost in our thoughts and emotions. We're not getting lost in what's causing us stress. We're actually coming back to the present moment and realizing the only moment that actually exists is the present moment, okay? And so when you get all of your senses involved, what you're doing is you're getting the complete experience in the moment, okay? And what you're going to notice is that your shoulders are going to start to drop, your jaw is going to start to relax, your face muscles are going to start to relax, and other muscles in your body are also going to start to relax as well. Okay, so this is the third step of this specific breathing pattern that helps you get grounded in the present moment. Okay, does that make sense, Tina? Yes, that makes sense. Awesome. So when we go ahead and bring this all together, this is what that pattern looks like, Tina. Number 1, we start off with the 3 physiological sighs to get that relaxation response started. We take 10 deep breaths using the 5-5-7 breathing pattern to focus on our exhales. And then step number 3 is that we engage all of our senses in order to bring us back to the present moment. So all together, when we do this in order, it will take about 2 minutes to do. And the cool thing about this, Tina, is that you can do this anywhere, anytime, and it's absolutely free, and it will dramatically and radically transform your stress levels in a snap. And so you see here, like, even as I'm doing this nonverbal cues, you can see here as I find my voice, even the snap that you hear inside of the audio is because I'm really engaging the student, right? I'm bringing them into the experience. It's like, wow, they're so captivated with kind of the coaching that's going on here, right? And so this specific breathing pattern is what allows ourselves to be able to get back into our bodies in the present moment and detach ourselves from getting lost in our emotions or our thoughts, and really helps us get conscious, right? We sometimes call this grounding ourselves, right? And you can do this in the car, you can do this at work, you can do this before bed. It doesn't matter. It's this simple breathing pattern that once it becomes a part of our version 2.0 identity, right? Once it becomes a part of, hey, I am just the kind of person that uses breathing patterns in order to manage my stress. Remember, we're trying to put all of this into our identity so that way it becomes something that becomes effortless for us, right? When we actually get to that point, it will radically transform your life. And so you can see here, remember I said we're going to sprinkle in different elements of the becoming process. This is an example of that, right? It's just a quick sentence. We're just mentioning it, but we're bringing the student to remember, okay, hey, I got to be able to make this a habit, but how I make this a habit is by becoming that type of person, right? And so now just in a second, Tina, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and relate this back to nutrition and eating. But before I do, I want to go ahead and get your thoughts, right? What are your thoughts on what it is that we just talked about so far, right? So I'm adding some dialogue in here, going ahead and getting that rocking and rolling, because at this point, you've gone ahead and kind of vomited on them a little bit. You've kind of gone ahead and, dumped on them, lectured at them a little bit. And so you want to kind of get that dialogue going again so that way they can cement this as well. And I know I purposely use the word vomiting because it's kind of visceral. It's kind of like gets a very, very kind of graphic response. But that really is because I really hate it when teachers or coaches or anybody, they just lecture at somebody, right? And so the reason we came up with that understanding of like, hey, when you vomit on somebody is because I genuinely want there to be that visceral reaction for you to say, man, that is something that I definitely do not ever want to do, right? Because if you actually vomited on somebody, it would be terrible, right? And so in the same way, unfortunately, people who are not actually understanding what it means to be an awesome coach, what it means to be an amazing educator, what they do is they just vomit on people. And unfortunately, that's not a good way to be able to put your students' brains on fire, and you don't want to do that, right? And so that's why we go ahead and refer to it as that, okay? So we go ahead and get their thoughts from there, and then we go ahead and relate it back to eating from there, right? So whatever they say, cool. So exactly, right? So we can use the same breathing pattern to ground ourselves before and during our meals. And it's a great way to be able to get a lot of those benefits that we talked about with the metabolism and the extra burning and all that kind of stuff, right? And not only that, it's also going to help us become more productive and less grumpy and less anxious because our brain is going to think less about food. Why? Because when we actually slow down and we actually get conscious and we actually breathe and then we eat, guess what happens? It's like the brain gets to register like, oh, okay, I've actually eaten. I can be satisfied. And so a lot of times people eat lunch and they're still thinking about food throughout the entire day, right? And so all of a sudden, when you actually slow down and you give the mind and the brain time to catch up with the food that you're eating, it's like, okay, hey, mealtime is now complete. I can now think about other things, right? I can actually use the energy that I got from this meal and actually focus on, working. I can focus on doing something else. I can use it to create something, right? And so when you slow down, you're allowing your brain to be able to acknowledge that you've actually eaten, so that way you can actually use that energy for something else. Does that make sense? Yes. And so yes, I know the world is not going to stop, right? We know that. There's no pause button for all of it, right? But what we can do is we can learn to be able to regulate our nervous system so that way we can actually relax in the middle of the chaos. So instead of us surviving, we can be thriving. Instead of us being reactive, we can be proactive, all just by choosing who we are being in the moment by actually managing our stress levels. And so even when there's chaos that's going on throughout our day and throughout your day, you can actually pay attention to who you are being, right? And when you are grounded, you're going to find yourself being able to make decisions as if you are your version 2.0 identity. And remember, like we talked about, Tina, you already know this, is that the more decisions, the more votes, the more rocks that you stack as your version 2.0 identity, well, guess what? You're going to start to become closer and closer to that version of yourself that effortlessly creates that dream life and that reality, right? So I'm going to go ahead and break frame here. Again, you'll see here, we're sprinkling that in a different way than we did earlier, but we're sprinkling that in so that way the student can understand how this actually connects to the bigger transformation that is happening here, right? And so the bottom line of all of this, Tina, is that whenever you're about to have a meal or a snack or any amount of food is about to pass across your lips, you want to ask yourself, and you want to become the type of person who asks themselves, am I about to eat under stress? And if the answer to that is yes, then you pause and take 10 long, slow, deep breaths and follow the breathing pattern that we talked about. Does that make sense? Yes. Awesome. Now talk to me, Tina. What was this experience like for you? Tina goes ahead and talks about this, this is why this is so different than what I did before, this is why this is amazing, this is why I love you, coach, all this kind of stuff. Cool, very good. And so ultimately, Tina, remember, I want to bring your attention always back to this very important point. We are becoming the kind of person who remembers to do this when we are having difficulty with our emotions, our thoughts, or our stress levels. Does that make sense, Tina? Remember, it's all about becoming that type of person. This is what the people who are really good at managing their stress, this is what they do. This is what they do automatically. It's because the type of person, the kind of person that they are. And so the more you practice this, the better you're going to get at emotional regulation, at stress regulation, at being able to manage your thoughts and emotions. And all of a sudden, it's going to not only make your health better, but it's going to help you in every area of life as well. So again, this is another example of big picture relating it back to the becoming process if this topic is happening after the becoming process coaching calls from earlier. Beautiful. Now, with that being said, the other couple quick notes I want to go ahead and mention about this, okay? I have 3 quick notes that I want to go ahead and walk you through here. Now, do you have to do this specific breathing exercise when you're actually working with your student? Well, here's the thing. There's a bunch of other exercises that we can do here other than breathing to help them slow down, right? If you remember from the training, there's like 7 different ways you can do conscious eating, right? So you can even have a chewing exercise here. That's something that you're going to be walked through later on inside of the module. So there's just a bunch of different ones that you can choose from, but we felt that the breathing one was going to be something that was extremely beneficial to the student, not only while they're eating, but also in other areas of their life as well, okay? Note number 2 is that sometimes, I've said this before, but I want to go ahead and mention again, is that sometimes you might not have as much time to be able to go through the exercises in full, and that's okay, right? You will be able to expand or condense or contract all of these different exercises according to how much time you have in the coaching call. And then note number 3 is that you obviously don't need to be working in the weight loss niche for your client in order for this to be relevant, for your student, right? For this to be relevant. Every student in every niche is going to need to learn how to be able to slow down, to be able to manage their stress, be able to switch from limbic to consciousness, right? And so regardless of what you are helping your student with, you are able to go ahead and help them learn how to be able to change that stress response, that limbic response, so that way they can turn on the relaxation and the consciousness response. Okay, so that is the quick notes that I want to go ahead and mention here. With that being said, we go ahead and hop into the actual action steps, which is part number 5. Inside of the actual action steps, you are going to be walking your practice student through being able to learn how to slow down via the 6-day conscious eating challenge. Now, if you do need a refresher on this, if you do need to go ahead and walk through the explanation for this again, it is slightly modified, but it is for the most part the same. You can go through and reference the previous trainings and the previous explanations about this as well. So you're going to go ahead and walk the student through the 6-day conscious eating challenge. And you're going to notice that, okay, now this is starting to make sense. I'm 7 coaching calls in, I'm 7 practice coaching calls in. This is starting to make sense as to why the certification program had us do all of that earlier, right? We said that, hey, you don't want to skip these because then we can actually talk from experience. You actually know the ins and outs of this challenge because you've actually done it before, right? Now, the difference though is that we did not talk about the 20-minute meal, right? So you are going to have to explain a little bit around that, right? So, hey, for this challenge, we're going to go ahead and take note of how long it takes in order to eat our meals, because we found that being able to really time how long you eat your meals is a big indication of whether or not we need to slow down or not, right? And so what we're going to do here is that we're going to time how long it took us to be able to eat our meals. And then for the actual experiment section, we're going to bump that up, right? So if you ate breakfast in 5 minutes, we're going to bump it up to 10 minutes. If you normally take 10 minutes, we bump it up to 15 minutes, right? And so we're going to go ahead and practice this. And we're also going to be doing this with the breathing pattern that we talked about inside of this coaching call, right? And so you're going to find yourself when you do this, you're going to be satisfied so much sooner and so much easier when you are actually eating, right? And so other points to consider, we want to make sure that you are arranging your home and work schedule to allow yourself with enough time to be able to eat your meals in this way. And then, hey, as best as you can, enroll your family, your coworkers, your boss, your friends, whatever it might be, in order to be able to actually create time and eat with relaxation, right? You can share this, what you are learning, and really get other people involved in your life as well, okay? Because chances are that you're going to find that this is going to be different than what it is that you are used to. But remember, we're working on doing the behaviors that are different from our version 1.0 self and our version 1.0 identity, because that version 1.0 identity is who created the reality that we live in today, right? And so if we keep doing what it is that we've always done, we're always going to get what we've always gotten. And so we got to work on becoming the kind of person who does this conscious eating, who does this slowing down effortlessly and naturally, just as a part of who we are. Because if we don't change our identity, if it's not a part of who we are, yes, we can do the habit. Yes, we can do it because we got to do the 6-day conscious eating challenge. Yes, we got to do it because we're in the transformation program. But guess what? What's going to happen, Tina, when I'm no longer there for you as your coach? You're going to go back to your old habits, right? You're going to go back to who you were before this program. And so that's why the identity change is so absolutely critical, right? We're working on becoming the kind of person who's able to naturally slow down while we eat, because that way it becomes easy and effortless for us. And remember, our external reality is just a reflection of our internal identity with a delay. When we actually become the type of person who slows down, all of the other benefits, all of the other, the weight loss and the stress relief and all of that other stuff is going to take care of itself, right? We already know that the reality, the desired situation will take care of itself once we actually become that person. Does that make sense? Yes. Again, another example of how we are bringing this to the bigger picture, right? And then action step number 2, we want to go ahead and continue to build on what was already covered. And so you can go ahead and insert any previous action steps, and you can kind of follow up based off of sleep. You can follow up based off of other things as well, energy, foods, that kind of stuff. And then you can help them double down on anything that they might be struggling with. And so a couple quick points that I do want to go ahead and make around this is that, remember, the action steps section of these coaching calls is really a great place to be able to give tips on things like dietary changes, sleep, movement, anything that doesn't need a whole coaching call to be able to explain. Now, obviously for the purposes of the practice coaching calls, you're kind of just following the script and the explanation. But when you're actually working with a student, this is an amazing place to be able to kind of maybe customize something for that specific student, right? Maybe that specific student really likes yoga. Maybe they really like hiking. Maybe they really like, whatever. You can really start to customize this around the needs of the student and really put that here in the action steps, okay? And then action step number 3, now this is completely up to you. It is optional, but because the 6-day conscious eating challenge really is a big change, it typically is not recommended to have like 3 back-to-back action steps for that. If you feel the student is able to do that, it is optional. You can have 3 action steps, but ultimately, remember, you want to make it actionable and you want to make it simple for the student, okay? So that's going to be very important. And then as always, you are going to have them repeat back the action steps to you, so that way they can take ownership of them. Go ahead and let you know about that. If you do suspect that they may not follow through, obviously that is there available for you as well. Typically around coaching call 7, they're starting to get in the flow of things. They're past a lot of the stages that they would have self-sabotaged. But again, every student is going to be different, so you do want to make sure that you are familiar with that as well, so you can coach them to be inevitable with their success, okay? Then part number 6 is ahas, insights, takeaways, and appreciations. Of course, we've gone ahead and provided for you a couple example scripts on there for you. And then, of course, you are going to go ahead and close out. Make sure that you have a specific date and time for when the next coaching call is going to be. You do not leave it open-ended, okay? So that is the explanation for coaching call 7. As always, I do want to go ahead and remind you about ditching the script. You can see as we're starting starting to go ahead and get deeper and deeper in these practice coaching calls. Me, myself, as I'm going through these scripts, I'm ad-libbing a lot more, right? And so you're seeing that's by design, on purpose. I'm purposely ad-libbing, and you're not going to go ahead and write down my ad-lib and then go ahead and, do it exactly the way that I'm doing it. Is that you're going to be able to kind of ditch the script as you go along here, because you do not want to be a remote control student. Yes, be a remote wellness practitioner by all means, but do not be a remote control student, right? You are going to have to understand the art of coaching. These really are just training wheels to help you find your own voice, because this is the done for you, do it yourself approach. Because remember, ultimately, you do not want to get married too closely to this curriculum, because you will be able to go ahead and customize this for your student as you find your own coaching style, as you find your own voice. So remember, this is not the right place to be if you are expecting to be spoon-fed. Yes, we are facilitating for you all of this. Yes, we are giving you what we find works best. However, you might experiment and you might find something that works even better. And guess what? That's awesome. Reach out to us. Let us know, hey, this is working for me. We'd love to hear your feedback, right? This is a group effort, but you don't want to be spoon-fed. You don't want to follow blindly, because if you want to be spoon-fed, you're in the wrong place. We are here to empower you to use your own resourcefulness, your own creativity to be able to get better. And hey, who knows? You're probably going to end up, as you go ahead and do this, you're going to find things that work a lot better than maybe what we recommend. And that's okay, because then you're going to be able to go ahead and let us know. We'll be able to go ahead and help the other RWA students in the RWA family. And that is the process of learning. So just like Albert Einstein said, education is not the learning of facts, but the training of the mind to think. And that is what you are doing here. You're learning how to be able to think and understand the principles behind this, and then take the foundations. You're learning how to replicate before you iterate. And then over time, you're going to get better and better and better. And so with that being said, I do want to go ahead and mention, of course, the pillars of the transformation product. Again, remember, just because we're focusing on the training piece of your transformation product, do not get too married to this, because we are going to be zooming out here in the upcoming modules to allow you to understand how there is synergy between your training, your community, and your support. Do not forget the 4 cardinal rules as well. Let's go ahead and now jump into talking about coaching call practice number 7. Of course, you get the gist of these now. Remember that you are going to be working with a new partner on these 3rd set of practice coaching calls. So make sure that you do go ahead and comment your availability, and make sure that we go ahead and walk you through all of that together. At this point, of course, I'm sure you are definitely understanding why these practice calls are important. You're starting to see some of the benefits of doing these practice calls as well. So I'm not going to go ahead and dive into that, but that is available for you in case you need it as a reference. Of course, the instructions at this point, you are probably a pro master at this. Make sure you do go ahead and set up your practice coaching calls the way that we talk about it inside of there. Couple important notes, because you are going to be working with a new student. If this is a student that you have not worked with before, go ahead and introduce yourselves. Hey, really go ahead and build that camaraderie and that rapport, because you guys are both in the program together. Go ahead and introduce yourselves. Go ahead and make it real or semi-real, right? Because you want to go ahead and act as if you are your partner's ideal student. So that way they can go ahead and get as much real practice as possible. Of course, the instructions for this, make sure that you do the pre-work, okay? Very important. Make sure you actually do read it out loud. Don't try to read it for the first time with your partner. That's very, very important. Make sure you set the timer for 60 minutes. If you do go over, make sure you ask for permission, and then you can go ahead and make that mental note as well. Okay, make sure you do follow the rest of the action steps as well. Just a reminder, don't take 50 gazillion months in order to go through this entire module. Try to schedule them as effectively as possible. That's going to be helpful for you to get through this module in a time-effective way. And as always, I know that you are going to absolutely crush it. You're going to do great, especially now you're seeing, especially here in Coaching Call 7, we're starting to add a little bit more about finding your voice, a little bit more nuance and more details when it comes to finding your voice. So with practice, you are going to get better and better. Remember, practice makes progress. And that's what we're aiming for here. We're aiming for progress, okay? Now, something different that we are going to be doing here in Coaching Call 7 is that now that you're starting to get the gist of how all of this works, we would love to be able to get your feedback, okay? This is something we haven't done yet in Module 5, but we would love to be able to get your feedback in terms of how are you finding these trainings, right? So yes, you're going to go ahead and comment your availability. You're going to go through all of that, but drop another comment in there and let us know, hey, I thought this training for me was, right? The typical questions we used to ask back in the day, but we would love to be able to get your feedback. Hey, what are you liking and enjoying about this training? What was it specifically that was a big takeaway moment for you while you were going through this training, right? Was it when you were talking about the mission? Was it when you were talking about connecting this to the becoming process? Let us know how these trainings are for you. Are they helpful? Are they not helpful? Like, really let us know, because not only is that going to cement it for you, but it's also going to instill the value for us as well. So this is something new that we're going to do inside of Coaching Call number 7, and I'm really excited to see all of your feedback inside of the comments for this specific training. And then from there, I want to go ahead and walk you through your action steps for this specific training. Of course, watch and study this training in full. Go ahead and complete the engagement questions for this training, the ones that we just talked about. Save the documents into the appropriate Google Drive folder. Once one thing that you will notice is that we are going ahead and including the slides for the guide, right? So there's going to be two versions of the guide. There's going to be the doc, which is the actual Google document, and then there's going to be Google Slides as well, okay? So that way you can go ahead and have an option of what you would like to prefer, whatever your preference is. Of course, we have all of those documents and resources for you. Make sure you go ahead and save them so that way they are organized accordingly. Make sure you go ahead and prepare your student action notes, comment your availability, go ahead and pair up with another student, and then make sure that you practice. If you have any questions, make sure you let us know. Make sure you do tag us. If you just drop a question without tagging any one of the coaches, myself, Coach Malik, Coach Cole, whatever it might be, make sure you go ahead and tag us so that way we do know that you had a question in there. And then make sure that you go ahead and conduct your practice call with your partner, upload it to YouTube, and then go ahead and comment with your recording and your takeaways. Okay. So with that being said, this has been coaching call number 7. You're definitely starting to get a hang of it. Keep on keeping up with it and keep on putting in those reps. This is Coach Yasin checking out, and I will catch you inside of the next training.